listening to ComedySlamRadio.com. From our studios to the world, we bring you the finest in quality entertainment. So pop some popcorn, grab a smooch buddy, and settle in for another fine show from ComedySlamRadio.com.
It's time for the Let's Be Frank show, where we get frank with your favorite celebrity and national touring comedians. Follow us on Twitter at Let's Be Frank Show, and if you miss our live broadcast on Comedy Slam Radio, find us on Stitcher Radio, Podomatic, and iTunes at Let's Be Frank's Podcast. Keep laughing, my friends. Good evening, my friends. This is the Let's Be Frank show, second show of the year, an exciting show. We have Wiggy with us, like almost always.
Almost always, yes. Hello.
And we are very honored and humbled to have the great Tom Dreesen calling in again this week. How are you, Tom?
I'm fine, Dave. How you doing, Wiggy?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
We are
almost always Gwiggy.
Almost always, yeah.
Well, he's almost always here, but he's always Gwiggy.
True, that is true.
Okay.
So, sometimes I do the show by myself, but, Gwiggy hears Tom Dreesen's going to call in. He's like, oh, no, I got to be in the studio that day. We got things I got to ask him about.
I owe Gwiggy some money. I owe him some money some years ago from a pool game.
Nice.
I wish I owed Tom Dreesen money for something. I'd be like, come get me, man. Come get me, Tom. You grew up on the south side of Chicago. You could probably kick my butt.
That's a misnomer that everybody from the south side of Chicago is tough, but most of us do have prison records, and you had to defend yourself while you're in prison, so that makes you supposedly a tough guy.
There you go. And he included himself because he said us. He didn't say them. So what's your rap sheet for, Tommy?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to hustle pool a lot. So one time I was hustling a guy and making a lot of money, and it turns out he's an FBI agent.
Man.
Yeah, and FBI, everybody knows it's an acronym that stands for Forever Bothering Italians. And
that is awesome.
No, I didn't, but I say that I'm being funny, of course, trying to be facetious, but I grew up, a lot of the guys that I grew up with did go to jail, and I was, at age 17, I was running with a bunch of real tough guys. I had 8 brothers and sisters. As we talked about before, I grew up in a shack. 5 of us slept in one bed. And I didn't have a lot of parental discipline. My father drank a lot, and so I was on the streets a lot. I quit high school when I was 16, and I was running the streets, setting pins in bowling hours late at night. Also working in a pool room, racking balls and hustling and running with some tough guys, and getting some kind of. We had a few fights nothing I'm proud of. Then when I was 17, I went in the Navy, and through the help of a judge, helped me get in the Navy. And then I spent 4 years in the Navy, and of course boxed when I was in the service. I spent 9 months in a Marine Corps unit called NEGDF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force. And so the 4 years in the service really straightened my life out and made a man out of me, helped me to mature, and so I say I was joking about that, but a lot of the guys I grew up with did end up in jail, and some of them are dead today,
Unfortunately, I think we all wind up having some of those friends. I know I've had some friends that are no longer with us, some friends that have been in jail. A lot of times nowadays, it's not necessarily for the fighting, but a lot of them went to jail for problems with drugs and child support. And I was just like, I can't believe how far in crazy people's lives that you grow up with how far they can falter. And then I've seen some of them come back, which is nice too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's great. One of my charities that I work hard for is Illinois Fatherhood Initiative. My golf tournament, the Tom Dreesen Celebrity Invitational, we raise money for the Illinois Fatherhood Initiative, and it's basically because fatherless homes. When I was growing up, 4% of the children being born in where I grew up at, my neighborhood I was born in a predominantly black neighborhood, black and white. But 4% of that community, Harvey, Illinois, where I grew up on the south side of Chicago, 4% of the kids being born were being born fatherless. Today, 75% of those children are being born fatherless.
Wow, drastic change.
77% of all teenage crimes are created by fatherless teenagers. 77%, that's a fact. This year in Detroit, 75% of the children being born are being born fatherless. So we're creating a nation full of criminals, whether we like it or not. Nationwide, when I was growing up, and then we'll get on to some comedy subjects, but as long as we're talking and we're being frank, I'll be frank. When I was growing up, if there was, my mother, when I was 13 years old, my mother said to me, if you get a girl pregnant, you'll stand by her. I was 13 years old. This was the mantra, not only in my community, in all the community, in the Polish community, the Irish community, the Italian community, the black community. If a girl got pregnant, the men of that community went out and got that boy and said, come here, you're taking care of that child. Because if you don't take care of that child, we have to. Now, the kid might say, I'm not marrying her. Okay, you're not marrying her, but you're taking care of that child. And then along came the government and said, no, we'll become the father. We'll be responsible for that child. And all of a sudden, as you see today, 72% of all, or 77% of all the crimes are by fatherless teenagers. And in my neighborhood, and in Detroit too, 75% of the children being born are being born fatherless. Nationwide, nearly 24 million children a year, 4 out of 10, grow up in father-absent homes. And those kids are more likely to live in poverty, drop out of school, abuse drugs and alcohol, become teen parents, commit crimes, and become incarcerated. 41% of the births across the United States, or about 1.7 million babies, are born annually out of wedlock, with an estimated 570,000 not having a father named on the birth certificate. So father absence cuts across all ethnic and socioeconomic groups, and it's prevalent in urban and suburban and rural areas. Contrary to popular belief, there are more white children growing up in father-absent homes than any other group. So, it isn't someone else's problem. It's everyone's problem. When kids don't reach their full potential, the fabric of our society is weakened, and they become dependent on government programs. And that's where I think the problem lies, and that's why and another thing that relates to comedians. Years ago, a magazine asked me to do an article on what all of us stand-up comedians might have in common. And I asked every comedian, from the new comedians that I was starting out with, from David Letterman to Jay Leno to George Miller to Johnny Dark to all the guys I started out with, as well as Don Rickles and Johnny Carson. And I asked all the comedians I knew, did your father ever say, I love you? Now, some of them said, I didn't have a father, or my mother raised me. Some of them said, oh, my father loved me. I said, well, did he tell you? No, he wasn't that kind of guy. Did he ever hug you, put his arms around you and say, I love you? I couldn't find one. Now, I may have done that survey with bartenders or truck drivers and found the same thing. But it's an interesting thing how important a father is in a home. And oftentimes comedians come from disorientated backgrounds, and they find love on stage. That laughter becomes love. But anyway, I said all that to get to that point there. Have I bored you guys to death?
No,
absolutely
that's actually
not.
A pretty good, interesting story.
Because now I can blame my lackluster comedic, comedy career on the fact that my father did love and hug me. So, Dad, screw you. You held me back by giving me love. Damn it! Why didn't you kick me out of the house?
Yeah.
Well, no, I say, if I took that survey maybe with bartenders or truck drivers, I found the same thing. But it was interesting to me that a lot of the guys said, I met someone who said, oh, my father loved me. But I said, did he ever hug you or put his arms around you? I love you. Oh, no, he wasn't that kind of guy. Or, some guys say, I never knew my father. And so who knows? Maybe that might be the one. But how important is the man in the home? The father in the home is extremely important, extremely important.
Now, what are some of the things that, like, some of the government programs, where are they failing and stuff like that? What are they doing and what are they not doing? Do you know anything about that?
Well, in my opinion, that they neutered the community. Once they said, you don't have to take care of that child, we'll take care of the child. Let me give you a good example. Where I grew up at, if there was one of my dearest friends was a guy named Everett Nicholson, a black guy. His nickname was Gucci. I talked about him on my album. I did an album in front of an all-black audience called That White Boy Is Crazy, and I talk about Gucci on that album, and I talk about growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood. But in the Polish neighborhood, or the Irish neighborhood, or the Italian neighborhood, or the black neighborhood, if there was a young kid roaming the streets, beating people over the head and taking purses and robbing people, the men of that community went out and grabbed that kid and took him home to his father. That's the way it was in those days. Mm-hmm. You didn't get away with that in any of those communities. Today, you wonder why the gang-infested Chicago, I was in Chicago a while back, and within 30 minutes, 13 people were shot. In 30-minute time period, 13 people were shot. Wow. Young thugs roaming the streets. Once the government said, we will take care of the responsibility of that child, these young men quit marrying these women. And it's not a racial thing, because as I pointed out, contrary to public belief, that there are more white children growing up in father-absent homes. So, once you take those men out of that community, once the government starts saying, we'll take care of these children, then the men weren't responsible. So there are no men in the homes, and there are no men in the neighborhoods. The gangs wouldn't have had a chance to get started if men were in those homes, because you wouldn't let your son get involved with them. Today you got grandmothers out on the street with broomsticks trying to stop gang members with AK-47s. I mean, it's insane, and no one will address it because they think it's politically incorrect and it's racially insensitive, and it's not a race issue. I don't know about black Americans or white Americans. I only know about Americans. Mm-hmm. This is my country. This is a country I served in the armed forces for, and if there's a problem in any community, it's all communities, End of my lecture. I'm sorry, you guys. I got off on this tangent again.
No, it's good. I mean, this is a good charity that you're involved in. So, I mean, it's obviously a good issue to talk about. It was interesting. I was listening to something on the radio earlier tonight, just talking about the other side of that with just single mothers that are how we treat, single mothers who have to, raise these children by themselves, and how, like in France, apparently, they get special treatment and stuff for if you're a single mother with children, you have a little bit of special treatment as far as like daycare and stuff, and some of the things that we're lacking on, in America here. We kind of sometimes chastise women that are taking on the responsibility of raising their child by themselves, because either the guy's just not in the picture anymore or just refused to, help out with the child at all. So.
Well, I would almost disagree. I think that single mothers are being promoted in this country.
Yeah.
We promote them and say, you don't need a man. Who needs a man?
Yeah.
You don't need a man around. And fatherhood has lost its role. And that's what Illinois Fatherhood Initiative does. It honors men who stand by their children and honors men in the community. And this is, again, we've lost 5 generations of young men. 5 generations. We can't get them back. I just pointed out that 41 million, 24 million children, 4 out of 10 grow up in father-absent homes, and 41% of births across the United States every year are children born out of wedlock, and 570,000 don't even have a father on a birth certificate. We used to be accountable for this. The communities were accountable for this. Neighborhoods were accountable. All of a sudden, we're not. And that's where it has to stop. As a comedian, as a stand-up comedian, all of us should be involved in some sort of charity, because we make a living at what we love to do. Mm-hmm. We're the luckiest people in the world. Those of us who make a living making people laugh. We love to make people laugh, and we get paid for it. Yeah. It's incredible. I'm so sorry, you guys. My assistant is out, and this other phone is ending. I'm gonna have to hold on one second. Anyhow, we make a living at what we love to do, so we should be involved. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, if you are not involved in the action and passion of your times, you should be judged as not to have lived.
Right.
So I encourage all comedians, all my stand-up comedians, to get involved in some charity, something that would make the world a better place. Emerson said, "You've lived a good life if you leave the world better than you found it." Mm-hmm. You
Right.
know, and I think as comedians, that's one of our responsibilities. We're given the opportunity to less than 1% of the population of the world make a living at what they love to do, and we get a chance to do that. You know, we are such lucky people. We have to give back. You know.
I know last year I was fortunate enough to do probably 4 or 5 different charity shows. One for the veterans, another charity show that I helped organize for Caleb Medley. I'm sorry, excuse me, Caleb Medley, who was one of the people shot in the Aurora incident, but he was actually a young comedian. So we threw a little benefit with some of the other comedians in the area to raise money. And actually, in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to be doing the second appearance at the Alzheimer's Jewish Community Center. They've been doing it for 13 or 14 years now, and they normally bring in 500 or 600 people. So they raise a huge amount of money, between 25 to $50 to get in, and then they have raffles and 50-50 drawings and silent auctions. They raise a huge amount of money, and it's great that I got to go there the first time, and then to be invited back to think people actually enjoyed it is pretty good.
Yeah, well, again, there's a couple of dangers in doing. One is, should we do charities? Absolutely. Here's anytime anything in our community that we can get up and help people raise money for a worthy cause. That's good. Here's the pitfall. Be careful that what happens is a lot of charities, once you gain popularity and you can draw, that your name on that charity will bring in 100, 200, 300, 400 people. They will say to you, would you come and do this charity, and we're going to give you a plaque, or we'll give you, some sort of certificate to say you helped us. And then you go there and you perform there, and then maybe a month later you want to go perform and make some money at a club, and they'll say, oh no, we just saw him. So you killed your draw in that area. You have to be real careful about that, for one. And the other thing is that a lot of times charities, and they did this to me and this is my 45th year in show business, but they'll say, we want to make you the Man of the Year award. And you go, wow, you're new in the business. Man of the Year, really? Yeah. Nice. And then you come and by the way, we're going to give you this plaque that says Man of the Year. And boy, you're really excited. And then they say, could you give us a list of all your friends? And what they want to do is sell them tables, $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever it is, table. And then they bring all your friends in, and you give them their mailing list, and and the next thing you know, the charity makes $200,000, $300,000. Everybody that works on the charity gets paid. The executive director, everybody has, the administrators, they all get paid. You don't get a dime, And the next thing you know, you realize you go back into that town to perform, and all your friends and family say, we just saw you. In fact, we paid $500 a person to see you for this charity, So there's a catch-22. You got to be able to be at whatever stature. Bob Hope, years ago, used to get $40,000 for a one-nighter. Today, Bob Hope would get $250,000. But in those days, he got $40,000. They'd say, but it's a charity. He'd say, okay, didn't just give me $20,000. He cut his charity fee in half.
Right.
So, your charity could make some money, but he did too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm actually paying. It's funny. This charity, I pay $15 because I pay for my ticket and my food to perform. Nobody makes nothing.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. Wait a minute, didn't I pay 15 or 20 last year? But I got a nice shirt out of it. They even put all the 4 X's I needed on the back of the shirt.
I love those charities where 100% of the money, or 99%, goes to the research or to the family or to something like that. When you find out that the charity you work for, that like 22% goes to the research and the other 78% goes to administrative costs, you feel a little bit used.
Right.
There are certain charities that I really like. Salvation Army, I really like. When I was in the service, they were always there for us. And like the head of the Salvation Army, I think, makes like $13,000 a year. And then you go to some of these other charities, and these guys are making $1.5 million a year, $2 million a year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But that's what you got to be careful of.
Yeah.
So, I know we've had some interesting conversations so far, but let's move this into a little comical side of the career.
I don't know anything about that.
And I want to, and I know we touched on the last time you called in. We talked about Tim and Tom, and America's first black and white comedy duo. But then the book came out about it a few years back, and you were talking about how they were thinking of making it into a movie. I guess Jim Carrey had bought the rights, and you and Tim were working on it last year.
No, Jim Carrey bought the rights to another book called "I'm Dying Up Here," which was a book about the Comedy Store strike in the late '70s when all of us went on strike so that the Comedy Store would pay. They were paying the comics nothing, zero, and making millions of dollars a year. So the comedians went on strike, and that's what that book is about, called "I'm Dying Up Here" by William Needleceder. It's a great book, and Jim Carrey bought the rights to that. Tim Reed and I wrote a book about being America's first black and white comedy team from 1969 to 1975.
That
book
also
was called Tim and Tom, an American Comedy in Black and White. And there's now, I have the script right here in front of me on my desk. The movie is going to be called Before Our Time. We got the final draft the other day, and now the producer's going out and going to get this film made. Hopefully, we like to be in production by the end of September.
All right.
Awesome.
Now, are you guys going to do some cameos, or do you guys get choices on who gets to play the younger versions of you?
Well, that's the producer wants us to be involved as much as possible, but when they buy the rights to your book and then they make a script in the studios, get a hold of it, God knows what's going to happen. But so far, they're saying to us, we want you real close to this venture, to be attached to it. Would we do a cameo? I don't know. But one thing I will make sure is that the comedy routines that these two young actors who portray Tim and I will be accurate, because we toured the nation before there were comedy clubs. We worked all black clubs in the North and the South, what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs, and the Club Harlem in Atlantic City. Before they had gambling, the Club Harlem, the Sugar Shack in Boston, the 20 Grand in Detroit, and the High Chaparral in Chicago, places like that. And then the Playboy Circuit, where Tim and I worked on the Playboy Circuit. So, we want to make sure these routines are accurate, so we'll do that. But as far as the casting, I don't know if they'll give us any leeway on that. I hope so,
I think it would be interesting to see from, whoever they select. You guys hopefully will have input on the young Tom Dreesen. It'd be great to see them bring it through, to see you still touring today and see, we don't want to say the old Tom Dreesen, so we'll say the current Tom Dreesen of today.
But the old current Tom Dreesen sounds good.
The real Tom Dreesen. You'll have to get a new Twitter, the real Tom Dreesen.
The fortunate part about our career, we're ageless, and that's true. Funny is funny is funny. Only morons that work at the networks, and by the way, the networks are loaded with morons, idiots that are 26 years old, and they know everything there ever is about comedy. So if you said to one of those morons at the network, gee, we got a room full of 25-year-old kids, he would think you must get a 25-year-old comedian to make them laugh. That's how dumb they are and how much they don't know about our business. I saw Rodney Dangerfield at age 80 destroy audiences at the Laugh Factory, just destroy them, young kids, so they don't really know what they're talking about. But the fortunate thing that we know as stand-up comedians is that we're ageless. I saw George Burns when he was 95 years old. I was working at Harrah's. I was opening for Sammy Davis in those days, and George Burns was next door at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And I went over to see him. He was 95 years old. He did an hour and 10 minutes. He didn't run out to the microphone, but when he got out there, he did a strong hour and 10 minutes. And when I went backstage to say hello, I said, George, how you doing? He had some cue cards, little 3x5 cards. He said, Tommy, I had some new jokes tonight. And he was so excited that he had some new material. He's 95 years old, but you'd have thought he was a kid, just starting out at the Comedy Store. That's the wonderful thing about our craft and our careers as comedians. We're ageless, It's funny, and it doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, or how old you are, or how young you are.
Exactly.
It just doesn't matter. If you're funny, you're funny.
Now, he is one of my favorite all-time, George Burns. I always loved him. But to go along with the ageless, the last time you were on the show, you had said you were at the Comedy Store, and I don't remember who was there with you, but you had made a comment that you can go up there and do your very first bit from when you were on Carson and get just as good a laughs. And somebody had said to you, you can't do it because it's a totally different audience. And you had said if they ain't heard it, it's new to them. And you went up and you said you went up and you killed it with 5 minutes from what you started with Carson.
my very first, and first of all, it wasn't a comedy show, it was at the Laugh Factory, and it was Jim Brogan, who at that time was booking the Jay Leno show, the Tonight Show. And I was saying, how you doing, Jim? He said, fine. He said he was looking at some comics, and we start talking about the Tonight Show and what he was looking for. And he said, you know, it's different from your day, Tommy. I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. He said the comics today got to be, you know, they got to be topical, this, that, and the other. And I said to him, I could go do the first Tonight Show appearance. I could do that material tonight and get just as many laughs. No, you couldn't. He said, it's a different era and a different time, Tommy. And he kept starting. And so I said, the first 6 minutes I do when I get up there are going to be my first Tonight Show. And the audience was young black, young white, young Latino, you know, kids ages, you know, 21 to 30. And I did my first Tonight Show shot, and it killed. And just to prove my point, you know, that funny is funny is funny. You know, you can update your material. We're in a constant state of writing new material. That's what stand-up comedians are all about. But we take old material we had, and we just update it a little bit sometimes. But by and large, something that was funny in the 1930s would be funny in 2013 if it was funny, you know.
Absolutely.
Just talking about the movie again too a little bit, because I've read the book Tim and Tom. It was a fantastic book. You guys really had some great stuff out there.
Thank you.
Since you had the finalized script, I don't know if you're allowed to talk too much about it, but is it going to go all the way through past when you and Tim kind of split up and did your own thing, where Tim went on to WKRP in Cincinnati and you went off to do stand up in LA at the store
movie,
and everything?
No, the movie starts out with us on stage at the Club Harlem in Atlantic City in an all-black audience and a heckler that went after me. That's how the movie opens up. And then it fades on out into both how we ended up, how our childhoods, and how we met, and then how the team, the hardships it endured and the good times it endured. And then it finally takes you to all that and what split up the act. And then it shows me down and out on the West Coast, my character, as it happened, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, sleeping in an old abandoned car. And then with Tim living up in Bel Air with the woman who helped split up our act, living up in Beverly Hills in Bel Air area, and driving a Mercedes down to the Comedy Store while I was hitchhiking. And then it shows me getting on the Tonight Show. Nice. And finally getting on, and that night that Tim was watching it up in Beverly Hills. And the next day he packed his stuff and left and started all over again. And it ends with him sees me out on the street, and we talk, and we're still buddies, you know. Yeah. And he goes on to work at some strip clubs. But in the end of the film, it says Tim Reed later went on to become Venus Flytrap on WKRP and appeared on more sitcoms than most any actor out there, you know, so forth and so on. Tom Dreesen went on to do 60 appearances on The Tonight Show, whatever, David Letterman, and ended up opening for Frank Sinatra, opening up act for Frank Sinatra. And it says that Tim and Tom only appeared together one more time, and it shows the film of Tim and I on WKRP Cincinnati.
Oh, nice.
I went on there one time and did a role on there, and it shows a scene that we did. And then it fades out with music and where we went, you know.
Cool. No, I'm excited. This will be nice.
Now, you had plenty of your own visits to TV, aside from just the talk shows, but quite a number of movies and television series yourself.
Well, not series. You know, I turned down more sitcoms than most comedians get offered in a lifetime during the years I toured with Frank Sinatra.
Right.
Because I so love Frank Sinatra that I did not want to not, you know, I was having the time of my life touring with him, you know, and it was just, you know, an amazing tour of touring with, to me, in my I think arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. And I was flying in his private jet, staying in his home, you know, opening in front of 20,000 people around the country, appearing on the same stage as Frank Sinatra. I didn't want that to end. So whenever the networks came to me and offered me an opportunity to work with some ensemble group and a sitcom, you know, I didn't want to give that up. Christopher Morley, the author, once said, "Success is living the life you want." And I was living the life I wanted, you know. But I did appear in movies and do roles. I just recently did a movie with Clint Eastwood called Trouble with the Curve, you know. And I'm going to do some more acting this year. I'm going to be in a mob movie where I play I'll play a tough guy.
It's nice.
I like that.
And I was going to say, to go along with it, some of the series that I did see you have appearances on were really more into the early '80s through the '90s, as opposed to
Murder, She Wrote, Columbo. I did
Baywatch Nights.
I did. Pardon me.
Baywatch Nights, Touched by an Angel.
Yeah, I did Baywatch. Yeah, I did. I did Facts of Life. I did WKRP. I can't remember. I did the movies Spaceballs and Lansky, and
They call
like
me
anybody
Bruce.
else, you do a role here, a role there.
Yeah.
But no love. When you're a stand-up comedian, that's who I am. First, last, and always. I love stand-up comedy. I love going out and making people laugh. It's the joy. As you know, stand-up comedy is the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. When it works, there's no describing the euphoria you feel after you've written some material and then it works. And when it doesn't work, there's no describing that feeling either.
So, what was it like to be on the movie set? Clint Eastwood, plenty of celebrities. It's a different environment than what you were used to before the movie. So what's it like working with those guys in that environment, away from the stage?
With Clint's also a buddy. Him and I have been friends for 30 years or more. In fact, Frank Sinatra introduced us, and we've been friends a long time. So, but to watch him work in his element, and he's seen me perform many times doing stand-up, but when you go on a set and you watch this pro, this icon, everybody knows their job. Just like with Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, when you went on his set, everybody knew their job, and you better know your job because he knew his. And same way with Clint. Clint keeps the same people on movie sets. He's got a lot of the staff, the group, the PAs and stuff are people he's had for years. And so the camera crew and everything. So they all know how Clint works, and you get there on time. And you hit your mark, and you know your lines, and you move on. Clint's a real pro. He doesn't play any games. He doesn't say action, because he says even when you holler action, even the horses get nervous. So he just lets the camera roll, and when he's finished, he never yells cut. He'll say we're moving on, and they move on. And it's just a nice atmosphere to work in. When I did Spaceballs and things like that, now you're with Mel Brooks. You could hardly wait for a little downtime so you could hear Mel Brooks' stories, because he was just wonderful to be around.
Absolutely.
But there's something to be said about working with professionals. I was fortunate in my career that first of all, I was fortunate that I went in the military. It taught me to be professional, to be on time. The other thing is to work with Sammy Davis Jr., to open for Sammy for years and to watch how professional he was about the show. To be with Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was never, ever, ever in his lifetime late. He was always on time. If you knew anything about him, you better be on time. If you said, be there at 9 o'clock, Frank was there at 5 to 9. He was always early. And if he said, wheels up on the jet, 9 o'clock, if you showed up at 9:01, you'd be watching the plane go down the runway, because he didn't wait for you. He was always on time. He respected everybody's time.
That is important. And I was raised with that same belief. Even going to work today, I think I show up about 15 minutes before I'm supposed to be there. It's a good practice to be in. You're always better off being early than late. Late, it's nothing ever going to be
here's what it is.
A bad time.
Frank Sinatra once said, Tommy, if someone tells you to be in their office at 9 o'clock and you show up at 9:15, you just told that other person your time is more important than theirs is. He said you just totally disrespected their time. And so when someone shows up late, they have no respect for your time. Anyhow, it is important. It's very professional to show up on time.
The biggest professionals that abuse the heck out of that are doctors. I hate them for abusing my time. You book when's the last time you had a 9 o'clock doctor's appointment and you got in at 9 o'clock? It doesn't happen, because they double book and triple book the time slots, and they see you for 7 minutes and it takes a half hour to get in. I hate those guys. And I had
the other thing is they send you to that back room. You think you're finally going to see the doctor, but they put you in that back room like you're in solitary confinement for another hour.
And then the nurse comes in and talks to you.
after 45 minutes, you start thinking about things to steal.
They got a lot of stuff out there in the doctor's offices still too, so it's one of the fun places.
They got the massive
except-
Q-tips, needles. They got it all.
Yeah, unless they put you in that robe with your bare butt hanging out the back, and then where are you going to put it?
I am too fat for that robe, so they have to let me wear my own. I could steal all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Since you've been on a lot of different talk shows and everything, I mean, you started off, you did Carson back in the day. What are some of the things that have changed through different, at least as far as talking about professionalism, from different show hosts and just different ways some of the other late night talk shows are run these days?
Well, the one thing for sure was there is no one show today that can launch you. Back in my day, the Johnny Carson show, the Tonight Show, that show could launch you. One appearance on the Tonight Show, and you're on your way.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie Prinze did one appearance on the Tonight Show, got a sitcom the next day.
Oh, yeah.
I did one appearance on the Tonight Show, and the following day, CBS signed me to a development deal. A guy named Lee Curlin was watching the show that night in New York, and I got signed to a development deal. William Morris signed me the next day. I was in the unemployment line, literally in the unemployment line one day, and on top of the world, and the next day from one appearance. So that's the difference, that none of those shows can launch you anymore like they used to. And Jay Leno's been on the air 21 years. Name me one comedian that he's launched. David Letterman's launched one comedian, that was Jay Leno.
Right.
In their defense, there is no television's a lot bigger than it used to be, So, and that's one thing. The other thing is material. Obviously you had to work so straight ahead to get on the Tonight Show in those days, or any of the shows. You had to do material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I mean, it's just like anything goes, to the point, and by the way, I'm not a prude. I can do a stag with the best of them, and I have. But I do a line in my act. Sometimes I'll say, two young comedians were talking about me, and one of them said, Dreesen is old school. And the other comedian said, what do you mean old school? He said, well, he doesn't use the F word. And the other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives? And I say, adjectives. It's material, and then the other part is that women comedians, when I started, Elaine Boozler was one of the hot young women comic, and she still is one of the best out there.
Oh, yeah.
And her material was about politics and about anything. She talked about the world affairs and everything, and women, a lot of women today talk about body parts and a lot of material that makes you almost cringe, but they have a right to, because if guys can do it, they can do it. Of course they can. But even guys that are, there's a difference, as you guys know, between good, solid, gut-busting comedy laughter than shock laughter.
Yeah.
And the young kids today going to the comedy clubs that are just going there for the first time, seeing a comedian live, and they see a comic, they think, oh, that's what pushing the envelope is, saying the F word every sentence. When you run out of creative things to say, you go there. I'm not saying, again, I'm not judging, because I love them all. They all make me laugh. I'm just saying it's much harder to be a clean comedian, to work straight ahead, than it is to work blue.
Yeah.
But a lot of the greatest, blue working comedians that were out there didn't necessarily start off either blue or as blue as they finished. I mean, a young
George
Eddie Murphy,
Carlin.
George Carlin,
Richard Pryor.
all of them had to start off clean and almost earn the ability to go on TV, or cable allowed them to change over into that blue material at some point.
Sure, to pick up a following, because television was clean. And now, today, you can go on Home Box Office, you can go on any of those shows and work as raunchy as you want to, and you'll pick up a following. There'll be, God knows, Chris Rock and people like that, they fill coliseums, and audiences accept it. And so there is only one rule in comedy: be funny. That's the only rule. You're not going to be, I don't care who you are as a comedian, man or woman, you aren't going to get everybody to love you. Sammy Davis Jr. had a sign hanging in his dressing room that should have pertained to us comedians too, but the sign said, I don't know the meaning of success, but I do know the meaning of failure. It's when I try to make everybody love me. And you can't do that. If you're a truck driver, a bricklayer, or a bartender, you can't do it. And especially if you're a stand-up comedian. You're never going to make everybody love you,
As long as you get the majority of them to laugh, it's a great night, though. But when you can giggle the whole house down, it's even better.
And that's why it's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. We're the luckiest artists in the world, because most artists paint, put their thoughts and their emotions on an easel and on some sort of canvas, and it may become popular 200 years later, 10 years or 20 years. We think of something funny during the day, and that night we walk out on stage and express it, and if it gets a big laugh, we get that approval that we wanted for our artistry,
Absolutely. Now, you got to take a lot of your great experiences in life, especially with Frank Sinatra, and turn it into a one-man show, an evening of laughter and stories of Frank Sinatra. And I know last year when we spoke, you had lots of dates and you were touring all around the country doing that show. How did it go? Are you going to be doing more shows this year?
Yeah, it went real good, and now there's I'll probably be going into Vegas with it. My agents are working on Vegas and a lot of different other places, and it's a fun show to do, because I think that's where stand-up comedy now has to go. After a certain while, you can only work clubs so long. In the old days, in my day, when you could go to Vegas, in Tahoe and Reno and Atlantic City, and there were rooms. There weren't comedy clubs in those days, or comedy rooms like the evening, like at the Improv or Laugh Factory. You worked in the main room. Well, most of them are now production shows. There aren't nightclubs across the land. So the comedian that stays on the comedy club circuit, he or she may make a little money per week, but they'll never make it as a star out there. They'll be able to develop their act. But and that's what they're good for. They're like a vaudeville to develop your act. But you've got to take it to the next level. And the next level are theaters. There are theaters all over this nation. I mean, you go to Kansas City or Topeka, Kansas, or Wichita, Kansas, or, Belleville, Illinois. There's great theaters, and all those. Some of them are in high schools that are state-of-the-art theaters, 850 seaters. So there's a lot of theaters out there, and they need to put butts in the seat. So you take the stand-up comedian, that's the next place to go. You can take your act as well as your life story to that theater stage. Every single stand-up comedian I know, man or woman, has a story to tell, their childhood. So they can, they can intertwine with video and still photos, as well as their stand-up comedy and their storytelling skills all into one. So it has a beginning, a middle, and an ending, as my show does. It's a story, and all comedians, I believe, have that story. Many years ago, I realized that a good comedian can make you laugh for an hour and a half, but a great comedian can make you laugh and cry in an hour and a half. And I saw two comedians do that, Richard Pryor and Red Skelton. And I always thought, I want to try that someday. And that's what the challenge is for me in my one-man show, An Evening of Laughter and Stories of Sinatra, because it's my stand-up comedy, but it's also, I segue over to a bar, and the lights go down low, and I tell a funny joke at the bar, and then the lights go out. And then Sinatra's on the screen singing, One for My Baby. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. I let that mood set in. And then when he gets to the chorus, make it One for My Baby and One More for the Road, the light hits me. And now the audience is in a bar with me. And I tell them the first time I heard that voice, I was shining shoes in a bar in Harvey, Illinois, on the south side of Chicago, and I was 8 years old. And he was on the jukebox. And I take them from that little boy hearing Sinatra on the jukebox on the south side of Chicago to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills. So it has a lot of laughs, but a lot of tears, too. And that's what each comic, you, Dave, you, Boogie, you all have that story that no one else has. And you have a lot of heartache in your childhood and your adult life, but you have a lot of laughter too. Mm. And you show how we take our heartache and we turn it into laughter.
Very true. And I know I had said the last time you had called in about this time last year, we had talked about in the beginning. You had said as a great thing as a comedian to start off with is, once you get to the point where you get to be on stage for 15 or 20 minutes. concentrate on maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of talking to the audience about where you are from and who you are and how you were brought up, because it makes a better impression and they remember you more than just the guy who told another joke.
Well, of course, what you did, if you say your first 10 minutes and know you only had 10 minutes, and you went up and did 10 minutes, and when you walked off stage, people say, gee, wasn't he funny? And he grew up on the south side of Chicago, a suburb called Harvey, Illinois. He went to Catholic school. He had 8 brothers and sisters. He played basketball on an all-black basketball team. He played football on an all-black football team. His mom wanted him to grow up to be a priest. You had jokes for every one of these subjects, but you left a part of you out there. And that's the uniqueness that no one else can take from you. There are a lot of comedians out there doing material about the government and about the airlines and about all these other subjects. But they didn't have your mom and dad. They didn't have your childhood, your brothers and sisters, and they didn't have your heartache and your joys, And so that's what's unique about you, and that's what you need to do, is work on material that is unique to you, to your personality and to your feelings and how you look at things and what really pisses you off and what really makes you happy. And, the other thing is show them your pain. Carl Reiner once said to me, Tommy, do you want to make them laugh? And I was a brand new comedian. I said, yeah. He said, show them your pain. They love to see your pain.
Nice.
and it's because a lot of your pain is what, we don't think about it, but everybody else in the world has got a pain similar to it. And they laugh because
Sure.
they see it in the back of their head. They're like, you know what? I had that, or I was almost in that situation. And that's what draws them in and, makes a fan.
And it says, I am like you. They see you up on stage, and they say, gee, this guy, he looks like he's doing real good. Or look at this girl, she's pretty. And look at, and I wish I was up there. But then you start telling about your heartache and your pain and your joy, and they say, oh, she's one of us, or he's one of us. He's just like me. I once saw a renowned comedian who wasn't doing good in Vegas, and I couldn't understand why. And I watched, and after a while it dawned on me, he was using words like that obsequious behavior, and not that we don't know what obsequious means, but it's not the kind of language that maybe somebody might use in everyday conversation. So in essence, he was saying, I'm different than you. And that's what you don't want to do with it. You want them to think, I'm just like you. We're everyman, and we have the same heartaches and joys and sufferings that you all have. In fact, I'm going to talk about mine and hope you identify with it,
Absolutely. You let them get in, they reach in and they grab a little piece of you and take it home.
Yeah, and more important, you as a comedian. When you first start out, every stand-up comedian starts out emulating another stand-up comedian. We all think that we saw that work. So when we're new, we're scared to be us, who we really are. So we go out doing an impression of what we saw another comedian. We work that way. And then one day, a little bit of you sneaks out on stage, either in an ad-lib or something, and it gets a laugh, and then you go, whoa. And a little bit of more you sneaks out, and pretty soon, you start becoming who you really are. Picasso said, try to paint like another artist, I dare you. In doing so, you'll fall short, because you won't paint like that other, but you'll find out who you are as an artist. And that's what you do in your developing stages. You're trying to find out what is so true to you. So one day, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it takes, you walk out on that stage and you're totally you. And that's exactly what the audience wants to see anyhow. It's totally you. Your heartache, your pain, and and again, Frank Sinatra in the song was so vulnerable. In real life, he was this tough guy and blah, blah, blah. But in a song, he was so sensitive and so vulnerable. He dared to show his soul to an audience. And that's what you do as a stand-up comedian. You're absolutely vulnerable. Every now and then I see a real crude comedian, or guy or girl, and yet they're so good because they're really telling it like it is inside their soul, inside that place that nobody else goes to, They're not afraid to risk. They're not afraid to go to that place, It's very interesting to watch.
Definitely.
So, last year when you called in, and this year, I know we talked about, some of the same topics, but it's good to reintroduce all that. Are there any, are there any big, just straight out comedy tours that you're going to be doing, or comedy shows with all new material? How often do you get out to just do a straight stand-up gig these days?
Oh, I do it a lot, and I do it mostly for corporate dates now. But I, in corporate dates, I'll research the company I'm going to do a show for, because that's where all the big money is. They once asked Willie Sutton, a big bank robber, famous gangster bank robber. They said, "Why do you rob banks?" He says, "Because that's where the money is." People say, "Why do you do corporate dates?" That's where the money's at.
Nice.
So I constantly work on new material, and I'll research the company I'm doing a show for, and people in the company, and I'll write special material about them and about the company and about their competitor and so forth and so on, and find out what happened in that last year. So I'm always working on, right now on my desk I've got 2 line pads of material that I'm working on, and then what I do, I take it over to the Laugh Factory on weekends here in Hollywood, and I try out the material. I take my tape recorder, like I have done all my life, and then I begin slowly formulate that material into my nightclub act. Will I be going? I again mostly corporate dates, but my one-man show now I'm taking to theaters, and in the one-man show I do 30 to 40 minutes of stand-up comedy.
Right.
Before I segue over to the bar.
And it's funny how I know you're going back to the theaters, but I had Bobby Collins on, and I think, Wiggy, you were here when Bobby Collins was on.
Yeah,
right?
I was here for that one too.
And that was something that Bobby Collins had really tried to drill home to us, and to obviously all the people listening, not to just rely on the clubs, but to learn how and to be able to book these theaters, because that's something that you can tour with without having to do the comedy clubs, or in addition to the comedy clubs. And it was nice he had invited us backstage and talked to us for a little bit. But and as you're saying, it's right. It's another avenue. And as you said, you have to constantly, not this time, but the last time, you have to constantly be reinventing yourself. And that's where you do your master of ceremonies, the motivational speaking, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is constantly changing, and working on new material all the time, and to just existing on this planet, to exist is to change. To change is to mature, and to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly. Constantly reinventing yourself. As an artist, that's what you want to do. You want to keep. And that's part of life, part of growth. It's the challenge that we all have. The other thing, and I mentioned it to you guys on the last show, but this bears repeating. One of the worst mistakes stand-up comedians get involved in their career is to compare themselves with other stand-up comedians. They'll say, "Gee, I started out with David Frank, and now David's doing this show, and him and I started out together, and doggone it," and they start comparing themselves to other comedians, in their other comedian success. We're not in a 10K; we're in a marathon. It's a marathon we're in. It's a lifelong run that we're in. And there's a great Hindu proverb that says there's nothing noble about being superior to another man. True nobility lies in being superior to your former self. Am I a better friend than I was last year? Am I a better neighbor than I was last year? Am I a better son, a better husband than I was last year, a better father? Am I a better comedian than I was last year? So your only competition in your whole comedy career is your former self. Listen to your tapes from last year. Look at your material. Have I grown? Have I changed? Have I taken it to another level? That sort of thing. That's your only competition, your former self. That's why I love all other comedians. They're my comrades, they're my friends, and I root for them. Are some of them further along than were, of course, and some of them less, of course. But all of us are the same. We're funny people trying to get laughs, from our society.
Absolutely. And it's funny, we just had I kind of learned about a whole source of comedy for myself that I've always kind of just kept quiet and didn't talk about it because I still have a corporate America job full time, but we didn't have a celebrity or a national touring comedian or anything calling in a couple of weeks ago. So it was Gwiggy and a friend of mine, Dave Hines, here, and I just decided to call a buddy of mine that I grew up with. and we sat back and just, shot the shit, chewed the fat, however you want to talk about it, for almost an hour. And the two of these guys looked at me and said, Dave, we didn't know any of this existed. How come you don't talk about it on stage? Like, this is great stuff. And I'm like, well, I didn't know if I wanted to, talk about those things on stage or how to talk about them. And they were like, this is, a half-hour material. What's the matter with you? This is real.
Yeah.
This is, screw Fat Davey stuff. This is stuff that really happened. You're not making anything up. And, it was fun. So we're trying to drag some of that out. We're going to see how it goes down.
Well, all of that's the wonder of our career. That's the wonder of our career, because everything is material. If ever I see a stand-up comedian, and I say, "Let me see your pencil and paper, your pen and paper," and they don't have one, I say, "How dare you?" You've got to always have 3x5 cards in your pocket or a notebook and your pen, because everything is material. And if you can't write your own material, you won't survive over a long period of time. Bob Hope might get away with it because he had hundreds of millions of dollars that he could buy material. In the earlier days, he was able to write his own material. But if you can't afford that, then you've got to, everything is material. You can learn how to write jokes. There's one thing I can't teach you. I teach at UCLA, USC, Cal State Northridge. I'll give comedy classes around the country at comedy clubs. Sometimes it's called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and how to get there. I can teach you how to write a joke. Comedy is two things when you write a joke. Number one, it's 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that or do that. So the setup line must hide the punchline. And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in the joke? So those are two things when you're writing a joke you have to remember. The other thing that I can't teach is timing. You either have it or you don't. And those who don't have it might technically be able to survive, but those who do have it, you're born with it. I can't describe it. Timing is something that each person knows. One night you're doing a piece of material in front of 20 people, and the next night that same piece of material in front of 2,000 people takes on a totally different meter because of the size of the audience. You let the laugh go longer than you did the night before. You start the next line maybe a little bit less. I can't tell you how to do it because I can't even tell you how I do it. My brain knows how to do it when the time comes, So that's the thing that you have to have,
Absolutely.
I've seen good stand-ups that had good material. I say stand-up comedians had good material, but they weren't good. And somebody else with that same material would have killed with it, because the material was good, so that means they're good writers. But whether or not they have the timing to be good deliverers of the material is a totally different thing.
I got a question for you about your stand-up. When you're doing your
Sure.
stand-up, do you stay scripted, or how much improv, if any, do you ever incorporate into your bit live on the show?
Here's the deal. If you know your act and you know the beginning, the middle, and the ending, you've got it down, and you're very confident that you've got it down, then you can ad-lib within the confines of that. Once you know where you're going, and if something pops up in the audience or something that even the stream of consciousness you had and you get a thought, you can go there because you're confident you know how you're going to take this home. It doesn't throw you. When you're new, you can't do that. When you're brand new and you've got 5 minutes, that's all you got is that 5. And you're up there fighting for words because you're trying to remember that 5 minutes, And when we become great at what we do is when the material is so ingrained in our subconscious that it's coming out like I'm talking to you right now. I'm talking to you now, and I'm not thinking at all of the words that are going to come out of my mouth. I'm opening up my mouth, and these words are just flowing out because I'm trying to give you the attitude of what it is I'm trying to talk about. Now, when your act becomes that free in your conscious that you can just flow it out, that's when you can ad-lib within the confines, and you can improv because you know where you're going. When you only have 10 minutes, you can only do 10 minutes. When you've got an hour and a half and they got you up there for 20, you can go anywhere you want to go because you know what I mean. That's what gives you the freedom to ad-lib, And by the way, I say that, but there are nights that in the middle of your material that you take off. That's what good comedians are. They're not afraid to risk. Good actors in the scene aren't afraid to risk. You get a stream of consciousness and you go there and you take the chance that this is funny, and some nights it is. And wow, it's so spontaneous, the audience feels it. And then some nights it doesn't work. But you took a shot. You took a shot, and that's why you're a stand-up comedian.
So let me ask you. Let's be frank a little bit. Have you ever had like a truly just horrible or embarrassing moment on stage, and what was it?
Well, I mean, any embarrassing moment would be when you got a piece of material and you're going with it and it doesn't work, and you thought for sure this was some good stuff. Now, also a good piece of material that does work and that night it doesn't, or somebody distracted you or a heckler and you weren't able to handle that, and when you're new, most of the time you aren't. And so those are embarrassing moments where the person took control of your stage. Veteran comedians don't let that happen. I mean, you learn how to don't let that person in the audience. I think I told you guys this story, but it wasn't on the last time. I can't remember. But I wasn't embarrassed. But one night at the Improv, I'd done about 20 Tonight shows, and I was working on my next Tonight show. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was only 17 people in the audience. And I may have told you this, David. I can't remember, but it bears repeating for those who haven't heard. But anyhow, I had like 17 people in the audience, and I was working on new material, and I did a joke, and it got a laugh. But a guy in the back of the room in the darkness who I couldn't see said something that got a bigger laugh. And then I did a joke on top of that got a laugh, and the guy in the back of the room in the darkness said something that got a bigger laugh. And no matter what I said, this guy in the back kept getting a bigger laugh than me. And finally, I did a joke that got a laugh. He did one that got a bigger laugh, and then I did one to top him that just was the joke of the night. And everybody applauded and cheered, and I should have left the guy alone. I was at center stage, and I walked stage left into the darkness. I said, "Just between you and me, I won that one." And in the darkness, he said, "Just between you and me, you needed it."
Nice.
Now, did you ever find out who that guy was?
Yeah, I went outside after the show. He was from Aurora, Colorado. I never forget. And I said, "Hey, are you a comedian?" He said, No. He said, "I hope you don't mind." I said, No, I loved it. You were really good. He said, "Oh, I just was having fun, and you seem like you're enjoying." I said, No, I loved it. I said, "Listen, you're not a comedian." He said, "No." I said, "Do you write?" No. I said, "Listen, here's my card. You ever want to write material, I'm your boy." Because this guy was good. But he said, "Oh, no." He said, "I just was having fun with you." I would love to find a guy like that. Lenny Bruce and Rodney Dangerfield had this guy, Joe Ancis. If you've ever read anything about early days of comedy, Joe Ancis couldn't get up and do stand-up. But you hang around with him during the day, keep your pen and paper handy, because he would comment on something that would just lay you on the floor, Again, there are some people who can write, but they can't deliver,
So let me ask you, out of the up-and-coming, and I know I asked you last year, out of the up-and-coming comedians that you're seeing when you go to the Laugh Factory and some of the other spots, who are some of the ones that you're digging what they're doing this year?
Oh, I love this guy, Johnny Sanchez. I mean, I watch him, a little Mexican comedian. He's really funny. There's a lot of them. I tell you, you go to the Laugh Factory in Hollywood here on weekends, and you see dynamite shows. I mean, you see all these, Maz Jobrani, and I see all these young comedians, and that just knock you dead. Wendy Lieben, who I love. I love to watch her work. Another girl named Natasha Leggero. I love to watch the young comedians work, or the new ones, the brand new, and the ones that are just on a roll. There's so many good ones out there, and it's action-packed. When you go to the Laugh Factory, there's like every 15, 16 minutes another comedian gets up that was really good, They have comics, and me, Paul Rodriguez, and Dane Cook, all trying out new material. But there's also a lot of new kids that you've never heard of that are really knocking them dead,
Can I ask you a little bit about, you do a lot of motivational speaking now too. And we're going to shift a little bit from that too. It's always like, it's a joy to be on this show when you're here calling into us, because you're such a dynamic speaker anyways. And it's been interesting. You're quoting Hindu proverbs and Emerson and everything like that tonight, which is great. But what is some of you do a lot of these basically just motivational gigs too. What is some of the things you try to enforce or get across to people when you're doing some more motivational speaking? Or is it just basically just tied into comedy with a lot of your motivation?
No, I give motivation speeches to corporations, to universities, to students, to and then I do tailor one for comedians called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and how to get there. because 85% of all stand-up comedians are insecure. This is my opinion, by the way.
Yeah.
Are insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, love-starved wrecks. And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, this is what I do. You know, I know how to write a joke, and I know how to tell one. You know, but most comedians are painfully insecure. I've known 5 who committed suicide. Funny guys, funny people, but so I try to enlighten them, the comedians, and I tailor my motivation speeches to them, the joy of stand-up comedy and how to get there, because I think how important they are to our society, that they bring laughter to the world, and I want them to enjoy this journey with this great gift that they have, this gift that no one, very few, less than 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the population can get up and make an audience laugh. So they're in a unique group, and I want them to know that, and I want to encourage them to continue this, but to enjoy the journey. You know, if you're an insecure, neurotic, love-starved wreck, when you're poor and unknown, when you're rich and famous, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. You thought rich and famous was going to take away this angst, and it doesn't. So now you have to be introspective. So I try to encourage them. But the subjects I talk on at corporate America or anywhere are 4 subjects. Number 1, perception. Number 2, visualization. Number 3, self-talk. And number 4, develop a sense of humor. You know, number 1, in brief, perception. All of life is about perception. You know, it's not what you see, it's how you perceive it to be. You know, and I think I gave you this analogy last time. The little boy goes in the backyard with a bat and a ball. And he said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. And he throws the ball up in the air and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. He throws it up the second time and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. He throws it up the third time and he swings and he misses. And he says, I'm the greatest pitcher in the world. You know, nothing has changed but his perception.
Yeah.
You know, 50,000 people go watch a Notre Dame Alabama game, and when the game's over, 25,000 leave very disappointed at what they saw, and 25,000 are very happy with what they saw, and they all saw the same thing. You know, you've got to learn to perceive life as a gift. You know, and how to that whatever comes your way, negative or positive, that it's there for a purpose to help you grow. But I teach them that perception. Then visualization, whatever the mind can see and believe it will achieve, was written 2,000 years ago. It's biblical in nature. And I teach comedians especially how to visualize their end result. If you want to be on the Tonight Show, you don't visualize how you're going to get there. You see yourself there. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. It only knows what you program into it. It must see the end results you want. It's your flight plan. It's you filing a flight plan. Your body is a vehicle, not unlike an airplane. The pilot who takes the plane from Boston to L.A. doesn't run to the airport 120 miles an hour, get out of the car at the aircraft, run aboard the aircraft, take off down the runway and say, now where am I going? He files a flight plan. Your subconscious mind needs to see the picture of the end result you want. Then it knows where you want it to go. You know, the end result. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. It only knows what you program into it. You know, so that's important that you see the end result you want. When I was sleeping in the abandoned car out here in Hollywood, I used to envision, I couldn't even get on at the Comedy Store in those days. I couldn't get on for free, begging to work for free. So what I used to envision was Johnny Carson talking to me, saying, "You're a funny guy, Tom Dreesen. You're a funny guy," knowing that if I was sitting next to Johnny, I had already succeeded over the other place, because you had to do 3 or 4 stand-up spots before Johnny got you to let you sit down by him. So I would see that, feel that, and believe that. Night after night, I would see that when I was sleeping in the car. Today, and I'm looking at across my office right now, there's a picture of me on The Tonight Show where Johnny Carson's laughing at me. I take this picture on my motivation speeches and I show it to the comedians, and I say, this is the picture I imaged in my mind when I was sleeping in the abandoned car. Nothing can become a reality unless it's thought first. Everything must first be thought before it becomes a reality. And then I talk about self-talk. The most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself. Make sure there's a great book by Shad Helmstetter called Self-Talk. Say things to yourself, positive affirmations. I feel happy, I feel healthy, I feel terrific. Those kind of things. Self-talk. The most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself. You know, and there's 100 of those affirmations that you can. I put them in my car sometimes. I'll have 5 or 6 3x5 cards, and when I come to a stop sign, I'll just have one mantra for the day. You know, my mind is constantly in touch with the positive. It is bright, cheerful, and enthusiastic, and full of good, positive thoughts and ideas. I might say that all day long wherever I go. The most important person you'll ever talk to is yourself. Say good things to yourself. You know, I feel happy, I feel healthy, I feel terrific. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. These are all affirmations, you know. And then the last is develop a sense of humor. A sense of humor is not when you have the ability to laugh at other shortcomings and misfortunes, it's when you have the ability to laugh at your own. You know, and we make, you know, old vaudevillians used to say, the first 2 jokes are on you. When you walk out there, do some jokes on you, you know, how dumb you are, what stupid things you do, you know. You know, those can laugh at yourself, and then the audience will laugh with you, you know.
Absolutely. Very cool.
So, you know, as always, it's great to have you call in. And, you know, we've had a lot of celebrity comedians call into the show. We've had a lot of great national touring comedians. And I know in the beginning of the show, I was always, you know, super psyched about, oh, we got this celebrity, we have this person calling in. And throughout the year, you know, you don't always have a celebrity on, and you have great national touring comedians. And, you know, last year, although you're obviously a celebrity and you're national touring, and, you know, this last year was one of my favorite shows that we did because it was so knowledgeable and you speak so eloquently and so matter-of-factly. It's great. And I had another person, and I don't know if you know who he is. He's been doing comedy over 50 years, and he just wasn't one of the people that made it huge, but he's always been there, and he's in the Seattle area. J. Wendell Walker.
Oh, no, I've heard of him. I don't know him. I've heard of him.
And it's well, the reason I bring it up is because people had said to him, you know, does it bother you that all these people that you started with are, you know, big time comics and superior? And he goes, absolutely not, because I only do it because I love comedy. And if I was just doing it to be famous, then I wasn't even doing it for the right reasons. And, you know, the more I talk with people and the more we do this show, and the majority of successful comedians really have more of that attitude. And this guy I think he's 80 now, just recently in the last couple of years won one of the Seattle comedy festivals. And almost like with Rodney Dangerfield, it was later in life where he became a little bit more successful and more successful. And to this day, he says if comedians come to town, you know, they're invited. They sleep on my couch. You know, he's just engulfed with comedy. It's just everything that was his life. So it wasn't about being famous. It was about, you know, being a comedian, being around comedians, and it's just worked out wonderful. And it was another one of the standout shows that we had last year, I think.
Well, he's got hit it right on the head. You know, anytime you judge a fellow comedian by whether they have a series and you don't, whether they've had more fame than you or they have more money than you, you know, we're all funny people, and we all are out there trying to get laughs. So there's a brotherhood among us. It's almost like when I was in the service. You know, you can talk all you want about God and country, but when the fit hits the shan, David, I'm saying to you, you get me home and I'll get you home. And so it's brother and brother. So we've all been in this combat situation in comedy where the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs, and we all know how difficult it is being a laugh getter. So there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, if whatever you want to call it, among all of us that we bond to one another. So where your stature is by society's standards, you know, that has nothing to do with the fact that we're all laugh getters, you know, and also if you judge, you know, if you're judging another person by, again, their stature, it shows how shallow you are. You know, there is no funniest or funnier. Anybody has to be a comedian. If you're a comedian 1 year, you know that. You know, there is no funniest or funnier. You know, it's all subjective. It's all subjective who the funniest is, and you know, you're driven by two energies your whole life: your ego or your Holy Spirit. Your ego demands that you walk down the street and get mobbed. Your ego can never get enough fame, fortune, money, power. It has an insatiable appetite. It will drive you until one day you're a failure, because it can't get enough, so it'll just keep pushing you. But your spirit conversely, is like the song of the 70s. All I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. That's all your spirit needs, is to love your work, to love your craft, to love your, that's all your spirit needs. And if you're going on stage, if you want to be a stand-up comedian because I'm going to show all those sons of bitches out there that one day I'll fix that, those people who said that I could make it, I'm going to have a Rolls Royce and a Bentley and I'll show them all, then you're in it for all the wrong reasons and it will eventually destroy you. That's your ego. But if you're in it because, God, I can't tell you how great it makes me feel to hear people laugh at something I wrote, how good it makes me feel to know that I made them feel better for having had my service, then you're in it for all the right reasons. And then it doesn't matter whether you're appearing tonight in front of 10 people or 10,000 people. Then it doesn't matter.
Very true. So I think I'm going to hit you off with one final question. I don't know if it's even going to be intelligent. So hopefully it is, because I wouldn't want my last question to suck. But, you go on all these shows and you're constantly being asked questions. When you're in front of young comedians and you're doing the class for young comedians, what kind of questions do you ask us? What kind of questions do you ask of the younger people to help them better themselves?
Well, those are the questions I ask are what I just basically said to you. Why are you in this? Why do you want to be a stand-up comedian? What is your? And I like to hear their different reasons, for it. Not to judge them, but just to see what brought them to comedy. What makes them want to do this risky, like walking on a tightrope. A guy just passed away named Jack Klugman, who was a great actor. One night I was on a Tonight Show with him, and he was a guest. He was on Quincy and, of course, The Odd Couple. And famous Broadway actor, he said, I can't do what you guys do. I can't believe it. He said, I watch you out there and you're doing this stand-up comedy and it's like you're suspended in midair, like you're walking a tightrope. And when he got done, I said, geez, I wish you'd have never told me. But, what makes a person, want to go out in front of all these people and challenge them and make them laugh? I'm interested in that's what I want to know, why you want to do those things, And then also, I want to know, do you think you're a winner? Do you feel like you're a winner? Because it's important, because, I think you need to have that one voice in your brain that says, yes, you're something special.
Just in case nobody else says it. You have to believe it just in case nobody else does.
Yeah, because you have to believe that you're special because, first of all, you are, and that's what I want them to know. I say, look, doctors study 5, 6, 7 years, and they're doctors. We study 40 years and 50 years, and we never stop learning our profession, And we're physicians of the soul, because laughter is healing. You make people laugh. It's a psychologically uplifting because the brain can't think of two things at the same time. So if you're making people laugh, they're not thinking of their troubles. So psychologically, it's a deterrent. Also, we now know because of Norman Cousins that the UCLA did research and found out that when the human body laughs, that endorphins are released into the bloodstream from the brain. So after a hearty laugh, you have this sense of well-being. Tears are rolling down your cheeks and you're going, oh, and this sense of well-being because your body has gone through an actual chemical change after a hearty laugh. So it's not only psychologically uplifting, it's physiologically therapeutic. So therefore, are not comedians physicians of the soul? Yes, they are. And how important are they? And that's what I want them to know. You are extremely important and you're special. They did a survey around the world of the 10 fears of man. Death was fourth. Pain was second. Getting up in front of an audience was the number one fear of mankind. If you can get up in front of an audience and speak about you're a house painter or a doctor or a lawyer or a truck driver, you're in less than 1% of the population of the world if you can do that for 1 hour. If you can get up and make people laugh for an hour, you're in less than 1/1,000,000 of 1% of the population of the world. So how special are you? And that's what I want them to know, that I'm in front of a room full of special people, of winners. And you were put on this planet and given this gift to make people laugh. So don't tarnish it. Take it to its maximum. Work hard on it. Ask questions. Go out and try to get better and better and better at your craft. Because you're very, very special. And again, don't tarnish it. One of the things I say is don't talk badly about another comedian. Have you ever heard a doctor? Have you ever gone to a doctor and say, "Gee, I'm going to go to Dr. Guthrie across the street"? Have you ever? That's actually what that butcher. I wouldn't send a tree to that animal. That jerk. They don't talk badly about another doctor because they have so much respect for their profession, and therefore don't talk badly about other comedians. There's a lot of comedians I've met that maybe I didn't like off stage, but I've never seen one on stage that I didn't find some value to what they're saying, even open mic Monday nighters,
Absolutely. Well, Tom, I do want to thank you again for taking some time out and calling in. I think next time we won't wait a whole year before we have you on again because, we can just go on and on for hours.
Well, you could probably cut up what I just did into 4 shows.
No, we can't do that. I got to have excuses to have you back on. Like I lost that last segment.
Well, Gwiggy and David, I can't tell you how much it was great to talk to you guys, and I look forward to doing it again somewhere down the line.
Definitely.
All right.
Great talking to you, sir.
Say thank you
very
buddy. Much
Take
again.
Take care, you guys.
And we'll speak to you soon. Hey, one last question, actually. When are we going to see you on Late Night again? When are we going to see you on
I'm
these
doing
talk shows?
Letterman. Oh, in fact, I just talked to him the day before yesterday. I can do it anytime I want. I just have to call him. I got to find some. I like to find another reason to go to the East Coast besides just doing Dave. So I tie in a couple other things too.
I like that. Everything we do, he's like, if I want, I just call Dave if I want to be on. I'm just like, yeah, well, that's great. The weeks go by. I'm like, who am I going to have on my show? Oh my God, I can't book a comedian. Oh man, I'm screwed. He's like, if I want to be on Letterman, I just give him a call. It's awesome.
It'd be interesting. If I were you, I would maybe what's the nearest comedy club to you?
Where I'm at right now, we have Snappers is probably the closest.
Yeah, Snappers, and then there's Coconut Sisters.
I would go there some night when you got a good audience and there's 3 or 4 comedians, and I would interview people out in front. Say, my name is David Frank. I have this show, and I interview comedians. I would like to interview audience, just a young guy, 19 or 20, a young Latino, then a black guy and a black woman or whatever, and just interview 5 or 6 of them and say, what do you like in a comedian? What do you look for? Or and that might be of interest to your comedians who listen to your show.
Absolutely.
Who's your favorite comedian and why? Or not even name your favorite comedian, but tell me what makes you laugh and what you tonight. I noticed like if they saw 4 or 5 comedians and what kind of material you like. Good question. Did you like the off-color material? Did you not? Does it bother you? Does it not bother you? I think that'd be of interest.
We'll work on that. Definitely. That sounds like a good idea.
It does. We could bring the studio right there to it. It's not a big deal.
Oh yeah, you could do that. You could interview them as they come. Ask them if you got 5 or 6 minutes and interview maybe 10 or 20 of them, as many as you could get in one night, and bank them, and save them, and then what's really good is when you got comedians on and you're on a subject that say, well, here's somebody that and you bring out somebody who talked about that, that same subject, a novice, a customer.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, I don't
All
want
right.
to produce your show too, David. I gotta hang up here.
Hey, the check's in the mail. I think I'm giving you 50% of nothing. So, thank you very much for
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much
you
for
so
your
much.
time. It's been great speaking with you, and I'm sure I'll speak to you later in the year and down the road.
Okay, guys. Take
All right.
care.
Have a
My
great
best.
2013. All right,
You
guys.
too.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, guys. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for tuning in. That was another great show with celebrity comedian Tom Dreesen. Gwiggy was blessed to be here. How do you feel, Gwiggy?
I always like coming on with Tom on. I mean, he's just one of my big idols. Like I said, I've read his books. I've read the Tim and Tom book. I read the other book that he said that Jim Carrey owns the rights to, the I'm Dying Up Here.
The one that's in
And
my closet
The
that I
one that's
haven't
in your
given back
closet
to
that
you.
you haven't given back to me. Have you read it yet?
I've read some of it.
Finish the book. It's a phenomenal book. It's not that hard of a read. It's a great book.
I am Flo.
I mean, you've listened to a lot of the stories that Tom said. A lot of the stories that he said on the first show was in that first book too.
Right.
And some of the stuff that he said on Tonight too was everything.
Right.
Actually, some of the stuff that he said that he's talking about within the movie is right in this book too.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Get a copy of that. If you're lucky enough, maybe I'll be willing to let you hold on to this one for a
Let
little
it
while.
collect dust in my closet.
But I have to get my other book back first.
It's like a trade. It's swap. And for those of
Yeah.
you guys that want to get out there, it's Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white.
Yep.
Check it out.
Yeah. We can put this right up here. Let's see if we can.
Put it up. They could look at it.
I don't know if you can't get a really good picture of it, but you can find this. I found this, I think, on either Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com. Pretty decent. So
All right,
Not too expensive.
Let's get to it. Let's walk off to the Incredible Hulk. My favorite part. We've come to the end of another edition of the Let's Be Frank Show. To catch up on past shows, find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Podomatic at Let's Be Frank's Podcasts. Want to be part of the show? Email Dave at letsbefrankwithdavefrank@yahoo.com. Stay funny, my friends. See you next week.